Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Nonprofit. So, because apparently we've solved all other of our national problems, lawmakers have decided it's time to bring back the obscenity panic. This time with a shiny new bill that could ignite the boldest wave of anti-porn prosecutions in modern U.S. history. The Interstate Obscenity Definition Act sounds like something out of a 1950s church bulletin, and honestly, it's not that far off. This isn't about protecting children, guys. It's about moral control dressed up as legislation. And if it passes, the ripple effects on free speech, artistic expression, and adult autonomy could be enormous. Let's take a closer look at this crusade in disguise. This article comes from The Interesting Engineering by Aamir Khollam on May 12th, 2025. Okay. My wonderful, wonderful panel. Thank you for being here. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As someone that, consumes pornography on occasion, allegedly, and had to figure out when the anti-porn legislation came along and jump over algorithms and all that type of stuff. It seems like the state is now recognizing that. And they're now want to pass these sweeping bills that basically say, like, hey, the things that you do in the privacy of your own home with or without somebody else is now up to the state. And it's not up to you anymore. So I'm going to start with you, Tracy. What is your kind of feeling and vibe about this bill?
I have to agree with you completely, Helen, that this is not, it is not about protecting children. It is about moral control. They want you to act, even in your private moments, how they want you to act, these people who are proposing this bill. I mean, the definition they give for the obscenity that they make reference to is so terribly vague, as well as on its face absurd, that it can only be, you can only get to where they seem to be trying to get to by interpreting it along their own personal lines, not along any objective basis. But
well, and I think the thing that that's so frustrating to me that this kind of ties into the LGBTQ because, being trans, being queer is now considered pornography. I'm porn, guys, just letting you all know. This is porn right here. That's basically the attitude is if you are a queer person, this falls under that same Obscenity Act. And we're going to also, not only, but it doesn't just affect queer people. This is now going to affect the straight community as well, because you won't be able to consume anything. And also as well, like it kind of for people that work in this industry now, not just actors, but like producers, directors, manufacturers, distributors, all the way down the pipeline to like people that do cam or OnlyFans. This is going to affect people's income, which is not the best. Not the best. Sex workers work. Even people also work in the industry. It's part of their job. This is what they chose to do. They should get paid. So moving on a little bit beyond that, Rob.
It's me.
Okay. So I was reading over your notes as a good host does. And I kind of wanted to go into what you were saying about the obscenity isn't protected by the First Amendment. I'd like to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on that.
I don't, well, I don't know if they still teach it in schools. I hope they do. But I remember the famous Supreme Court of case where it came down to I can't define obscenity, but I know it when I see it. Yeah. And due to that principle of what is obscene is different for each person. and it must be, because obscenity is something that is nearing profane. Therefore, any single person's sensibilities is the thing that is offended. And so if you start codifying or attempting to prescribe what is obscene, you are now not just telling people what they should be offended by, but what they must be offended by. And that is why they didn't do anything with obscenity in the past, because they realized that that's an absurd stance to take. So what's happening now, Tracy said that their definition of obscenity and what they're working on right now is too vague. I pulled it up, and it is, I had it. Content that would be considered obscene if it appeals to the prurient interests in nudity, sex, or excretion. It's a three-part definition. Depicts or describes. Thank you. Already. Depicts or describes sexual acts intended to arouse or to gratify, and lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value when viewed as a whole. And like, this is just everything. Like I'm not even trying to be like, ooh, I want to have my porn. It's like, okay, it's
everything.
It's lit. Yeah,
it's
because
everything.
the first one is nudity, sex, or excretion. Okay, sure. We could like literally point to nudity. We could point to sex. We could point to excretion. I'll give them that. Sure. Depicts or describes sexual acts intended to arouse or gratify. How the hell do you know what I intended?
Venus and Adonis by Shakespeare. Venus says, graze on my lips, and if those hills be dry, stray lower where the pleasant fountains lie, which is describing sexual acts. And I bet you anything that a Shakespearean scholar will tell you, yeah, that's a dirty joke that Shakespeare put in there to get people to chuckle. It doesn't say sexual gratification. It just says to gratify. So even if the intent is to make you laugh, that is gratifying you.
I'm not going to point out Bible verses that talk about excretions. I'm just not.
Is flirting outlawed now? Just flirting?
It can really be stretched to that. Flirting in media can be covered under this.
Because flirting, I am sexually attracted to you. I would like to possibly have a good time. And so...
Well, that's where,
like,
okay.
What?
The problem is that it's absurd. That's the issue. This whole thing is absurd because I want to steel man them, because I want to pretend that they're even trying to have a sensible conversation. But that's not what's happening, because I would be like, oh, well, clearly, no, you didn't intend that, but that's requiring a reasonable person. And that's just not what's happening.
I agree wholeheartedly, Rob.
And like it's that moral crusade in disguise. You know, it's we are now living in Project 2025. These are religious fundamentalists and anti-porn groups, and people that don't understand that people can be adults and decide what they're going to do with their bodies, and some of it might be on camera. So
do you I want to ask, have you guys seen Amish Paradise by Weird Al?
Yes. I love that song.
Do you know the part where she brings up her skirt and you see the ankle?
I know.
Does that count now? Yeah. Like, is that enough?
That's
under
the thing.
this definition.
There's a content creator on YouTube that I really like, and she did a whole point of ankle shots and put it on Instagram and raised thousands of dollars for charity, because she sent it to I think like the Trevor Project, and they caught constant likes, and this, it was just ankle shots. Her, and she's also a fashion designer, so she had wonderful like lighting and outfits, but it's all ankle shots. So is that arousing? Like, are we talking about like people that have foot fetishes? Are we talking about people that, have certain proclivities, like balloon popping? That is a fetish. Are we going to not allow those things now?
Yeah. Whose prurient interests are we using for this measurement?
Most medicine is based off like a 20 to 35-year-old white man. So
So everything. So everything. I am 27. I am dead in the middle of that. And let me tell you, I will go out onto the street, or I'll go into my Facebook. I will find you one guy in that age group who is into whatever you want. They made Rule 34. But I think that a really something I'd like to point out here, if you guys don't mind, is that third part that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about. Yeah. But if something is obscene, the most common definition for that which is obscene is offensive or disgusting by accepted standards of morality or decency. So do you guys know what art is? like just so like real quick, the most common, the most widely accepted definition under Oxford is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, really anything a human makes, typically in a visual form such as a painting or sculpture. Typically, of course, it doesn't have to be that. Producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. So if the definition seems self-contradictory. If you call it obscene, you're acknowledging that it is evoking emotions in you, thereby acknowledging that it has artistic merit.
I think I have no idea how founded this is, but you just made me realize where it's like a lot of the abstract art that was funded to fight communism in like the 1970s, where it's just like, we're just going to produce art and the whole point is supposed to have feelings. I feel like a lot of that has transferred over into deepities and profundity, where the idea is that if you look at art, you need to feel something deep. Whereas like you can look at art and be sad. You can look at art and be happy. You can look at art and you can be horny. That doesn't make it not art.
Yeah. Any emotional response is an indication that you are viewing something that is art. And it doesn't have to even be intended to do that.
Yeah,
it just has to provoke it.
Tracy, there's naked people in this art. So obviously, like, it doesn't have artistic value.
And the Venus de Milo and the statue of David.
So,
well, they can't have their cake and eat it too, because attempting to steel man them, what they're going to say is something like, okay, fine, sure, it's artistic, but it is still it's still depravity, and it is still obscene, and it is still morally unjust. And if they wanted to go that route, I would be interested, honestly, because at least they're having a conversation about, they're having an art conversation about what is art, but they've already given that up within their own definition: serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So they want to have their cake and eat it too.
It's that qualifier. It's when they say serious, they added the qualifier serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So that is another thing where I don't know how we're defining what makes it serious artistic or literary value.
That's a good point.
Is because they could just defeat my entire self-refuting definition argument by saying, well, no, we're talking about serious ones. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, yeah, like Tracy, I kind of want to touch on what you said about like intent, and that it's like you brought up like a Shakespearean innuendos and modern satire. Is this going to follow under the same kind of thing? Because if it arouses or makes me think of sexy things, like, am I now under this law where I thought of like, something I referred to, as a sexual act, like that's where my brain goes, or an organ or whatever the fuck. Like, what are we talking about now? So like, was anyone to defend themselves with bad faith accusations of obscenity? Like, it doesn't make any sense. If you were going to say they're like, well, I didn't intend to say a cigar is just a cigar.
Here's the deal with intent in like legal settings is it's terribly difficult to establish. You need kind of like an admission of intent in a lot of cases, like a documented intent or whatever. And so like we could sidestep all of that by just changing how you advertise for Brazzers. Like just change the advertisement and it would, I don't know.
Well, yeah, well, in some ways, in many ways, I suspect that this entire conversation is what they want to have happen because, quote the article, this is aligned with Project 2025. It characterizes porn as a tool for spreading transgender ideology and sexualization of children. So as we quibble about the definition of things, as reasonable people trying to enact laws which will necessarily inform the behavior of other people, that doesn't matter. That's not what it's about. You said it in the beginning. It's really just trying to push their own moral mandate onto others, but they just can't say it, so they have to use other means.
Yeah, and that's the way that it goes. And unfortunately, with this rhetoric, like we're like we just spent 15 minutes talking about definitions, and now we're getting to what the core of this is basically trying to enforce this sort of Christian value, everybody should think like us. Everybody should do the same thing as us. And if you don't like it, we're going to force you to do it through legislation and law. And I'm like, I'm sorry. It's like, as a progressive, I'm like, hey, you're supposed to make sure, like, some basic things like, terrorists are not taking pisses in my backyard. I have education, access to healthcare, and I'm subject to the law just the same as any other equal citizen. Great. That would be great. But when you start telling me what I can and cannot consume in my own home alone or with a partner, that's the problem. And we all know what the ethics of abuse are. So if I'm a grown adult, why can't I consume the content that I want to consume? Henceforth, I want to ask the legislation this question. Rob, why can't I not consume the content that I want to consume under this new legislation?
Because it doesn't align with how they want people to behave. That's just where it is. Like, that's why I'm getting frustrated. A younger me would say, would want to engage in the actual conversation that's happening, but either things have changed or I've become more jaded, porque no los dos, where it's not actually about the conversation. It's smoke and mirrors. They have the agenda that they want to push, and then there are bad faith actors that are speaking in such a way to make it look like we can do things or have a discussion about it, and we just can't. So you have to like speak to the heart of what they're doing. But then because you're not engaging in the conversation that's actually taking place, they get to go, that's not what I'm saying, but that's what they're doing.
Once again, we run into the problem of establishing intent. A lot of the time we can figure it out, but if you don't have like a straight paper trail, you can't really bring it in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I agree, but I also don't even hate the idea in principle of going for intent, right? That's how you get the difference between murder 1, 2, and manslaughter. Intent's very important.
Mayhaps.
Well, I kind of agree with that, Rob, because if we're going to, like, everything in law is nuanced. Like, what if this is going to be a bill that could be introduced into law? What is the nuance? Because does that mean that if you're watching like, an action movie, does a guy get to take his shirt off? And then, certain people with different sexual proclivities might find like, I find Idris Elba a very beautiful human being. Like, and just by looking at him, does that fall under this law? Because it is evoking an arousing experience. It's like
intended to arouse.
What are we talking about?
Well, here's the thing. You got to ask yourself, Helen, is Idris Elba a serious artist? There you go. That's the cop out.
Acting career. Like, I don't know what's going on inside his brain.
That's the ultimate cop out, because they can just, but then they can just say, I don't think he is. And then however many more people they get on the side of I don't think they are, that's the side that wins.
That's why, like, I said way earlier, the Supreme Court ruling was like, I don't know what obscenity is, or I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. I legitimately find that to be an extremely brave position, because it is admitting reality of the ignorance of the contents of other people's minds. That's just theory of mind. Like, people think different, and I can't presume what they mean.
I think I get what you're saying.
Well, the thing is, though, like,
am I not clear?
No, I think that, like, that's the whole point, though, because like you don't know what they mean. Tracy, why don't you know what he means, man?
I can't presume. Other people think differently, and I can't presume what they mean.
I don't know. Like, I keep thinking, like, you know, maybe this is just me being like, you know, like expecting people to be reasonable adults, you know, like, as far as like things that I might find obscene, but nobody's being harmed, I'm kind of like, okay, that's fine. I don't know, because it's not my brain, and I don't want to say what people, you know, can and cannot consume, because guess what? I don't think I should be able to do that. Again, like, but we can also, when there's harm involved, we know where the line is.
Well,
as a reasonable person.
Well, as Tracy's saying, remember, it has to be intended. And if we know anything about the people who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, I wonder how many people are going to get in trouble for being aroused by furry art and cartoons.
Oh, I think. So if I could,
you're right. World, you're so furry, right. Like,
Jessica Rabbit,
Gadget.
Jessica Gadget. Oh,
Gadget.
Goodness.
Lola Rabbit.
Space Jam. Lola.
Even
Luna. Let's talk about modern cartoons.
Maybe aroused by Ariel when I was a young little queer. When I was a preteen, I? Maybe.
I want to pull to the beginning of this article where they say that obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment, and as near as I can see, like that's one of the primary reasons it's there. So you can't be attacked by the government for saying ultimately innocent but offensive things.
Well, that was all,
innocent,
like,
maybe,
you know, the people versus Larry
Flint.
Larry Flint was like, hey, you may not like this, but you cannot stop me from publishing it, because they talked about the nuance of the First Amendment and the law. Like, just because you might find it offensive doesn't mean that it should not be distributed. That was like, we went through this in the 90s, guys. So I think that with, you know, this new rhetoric, they're doing the same thing. This is the same old song and dance, everybody. It is. And we have plenty of other information on what is obscene and what's not obscene. And if you want to be titillated by new content, please click on a video and like and subscribe.